Hey, Manny, Pete Thamel from Yahoo Sports. You are one of the many teams in this division that has a lot of returning starters, and really like a lot of teams around college football. I'm curious from the macro if you think that the fact that there are so many teams and so many starters returning, how do you think that will affect competitive balance? And I think the sport is sort of waiting for people to crack the Clemson, Alabama, Ohio State stranglehold. Do you think the preponderance of returning starters could perhaps do that, Manny?
Yeah, Pete, that's a really good question that I think will be one of the storylines of the 2021 season. And because so many people return so much experience, at the end of the day, does it really cancel out? What's been great for Miami's standpoint is having such an experienced team. Some of the guys we brought with us here today for Media Day is the offseason. You know, how do we go through spring practice? How do we go through the workouts? And guys that are experienced, but they came back for the right reasons. They want to see Miami win, and they want to set an example for the younger guys coming into our program, which to me at Miami we've not always had. We've not always had really strong veteran leadership that's been around long enough to really influence our recruiting classes. And I think with the senior class, the super senior class that we have, I think that's how they can just not help transform Miami in wins and losses this year, but actually going forward.
Coach, we'll go to your left in the third row.
Bob Holliday, WRL.com. Manny, you have an All-American punter returning in Lou Headley, but maybe Lou punted a little too often last year. What do Eric and Mike and the offense have to do to maybe keep Lou on the sideline a little more? And then secondly, you don't have Jose to finish drives last year. He was the best kicker in the league. What does the place kicking race look like? Yeah,
we love Lou Headley. I do think it's times we want to see him on the sideline. Lou wants to get out there and punt, but he's also for the team. But we set the NCAA record for net punt a year ago, which is phenomenal. Field position, being able to change the field. And we know we've got a great weapon in Lou. Obviously, offensively, the big things we want to look at this year is we have to give up less negative plays in the run game. And that's been a big point of emphasis in our offseason study, spring practice, and going into training camp. And then be more explosive down the field. So, you know, being more efficient in our run game and more explosive in our pass game will help us punt less. Now, in terms of place kicking, you know, again, you're losing the Groza winner a year ago in Borregales, and you're replacing him with Borregales. And having Andres come in, really, you know, it's about taking on your older brother's jersey number. Same name, guy just won the Groza, walks out of the program, and you take his place. But the guy came in spring practices and mid-year, and I think instantly earned the respect of everybody in the locker room. Had kind of a bad day right before our first scrimmage at Hard Rock Stadium. Went into Hard Rock Stadium, and I'm talking about knocked it right down the clown's mouth every time we had him out there, including a 53-yarder in a 1-minute drill situation. So I think that gave the team a lot of confidence. In our kicking game, Jonathan Packey does a phenomenal job with all of our special teams, and we take a lot of pride in our specialists. Clay James, our long snapper, we feel like we've got the best group of specialists in America.
Coach, your next two questions are going to come from the right side of the room. We're going to go 6th row back, sir, if you don't mind standing up and identifying yourself, please.
Cortland Griffin with three-point conversion. Coach, you've had a lot of players come out of this program with professional pedigree. Two of them being here today with Bubba and De'Eric. Can you speak about the leadership role that you expect them to take on this season?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit what I mentioned before is, number one, they've been phenomenal leaders their entire time here at Miami. But they're back here for Miami to win. And I think what we've recognized as a team is that when the team does well, all the individuals do well. And that my individual goals can be met by the team meeting its goals. So the way that they can set an example for the way these guys work, you know, I mean, and you think about the stories of Bubba and Mike and De'Eric just in the off-season workouts. And these guys they're not just going through the workouts, hey, this is my last year, I'm going to just do whatever. They're smashing the run. So if we're running 110s, they're not just making the times, they're racing the 110s. And so I'm a freshman watching that. You know, people can say whatever they want to say, but ultimately we're going to observe, and I'm going to see what you're doing. And the way that they've worked from all of, you know, Dave Feely's reports this summer, that's the leadership. That's real leadership, more so than maybe the Hollywood speech of rah, rah, let's go. Players will follow those who set the example, and there's 3 guys over there that have done a phenomenal job in the offseason of doing that.
Coach, just about the exact same position.
Ewan McCreath, Herb FM Sports Radio. Coach, with the defensive new hires as well as the analyst and you resuming the play calling duties on the defensive side of the ball, what does that mean differently for the Canes defense this year?
Well, we're going to be improved on defense this year, and that is all going to be about the players. It's fun to talk about the coaches and the play calling and this, that, and the other, but great defense is ultimately about the connection between the players on the field, the trust and the accountability. And that's where I felt like a year ago we just didn't quite have that to the extent we take a lot of pride in how we play defense at Miami. I just felt like that we took a step back in that regard, not to our standard. I think our guys have a chip on their shoulder. Now we do have, new coaches, as you mentioned. What that does, what I like, is it took all of our players and took every one of those guys out of their comfort zone. Because now maybe your coach that recruited you, or the coach you've been around, here comes a new set of eyes. Guy looks at you a different way. He's going to challenge you in a different way. And that's ultimately what we needed. We needed to be out of our comfort zone defensively at Miami because we weren't proud of how we finished last year. So, again, it's easy to talk about calling the defenses. It doesn't matter what defense you call if the players don't have that bond and trust. That's what makes all great defenses. And I think the new staff, some of the great coaches that we've been able to add that I'm honored to work with, but ultimately it comes down to those guys in that defensive team meeting room taking the ownership of it and playing with that Miami chip on their shoulder.
Coach, from the podium, in the first 9 games of 2020, Miami goes 8-1, then drops the last 2. Does this influence the offseason compared to winning out at the end of the year?
That's hard to say. I don't know, again, losing our last 2 games, it's not 1st and 12 in our opening game this year. I think what set the tone of our offseason is when Derek King and Mike Harley and Bubba Bolden and Amari Carter, and I could name so many more, decided to come back. And I think that's the thing that had not been happening at Miami. And it became the thing to do and for the right reasons. And I think those guys have affected our offseason program regardless. There had to be something in that locker room a year ago that guys wanted to be a part of, and I think that's part of the reason, and they can maybe address it better than I, of why a lot of the players ultimately made the decision to come back to Miami, to run it back. I think we felt like we had a pretty good team a year ago. And we went through some COVID things at the end of the year that had whatever effect it had. And let's have a proper year, go through, and let's see how good we can actually be.
Coach, your last question coming from the podium again. One report has the Hurricanes as having the most experienced offensive line in FBS. How much of a lift does this give you that a traditionally overshadowed group nationally is gaining some really good attention in Miami?
Well, we had to take some lumps a couple years ago. We started 2 true freshmen on the offensive line, and that's tough. But the great thing is freshmen become sophomores, they become juniors, and what it changed for us that I had not seen at my time at Miami was the competition in our spring practice. We had guys, Garen Justice did a great job of mixing and matching. We didn't want anyone to feel like they had a starting role locked up, can move different guys around, and guys had to come to practice every day, and they really had to bring it because there was no telling, and there's still no telling really who the first 5 are going to be. And having, all coaches can say that, but really having a guy that can take your job is going to bring out the best in you. And I think this is the first time that we've had a 2 deep on the offensive line of somebody that when I walk out to practice every day, if I am not at my best, I'm going to end up on second team by the end of the day. And I think that's making us, and the players told me, Coach, it's amazing how much better everybody got because we had to compete every day in practice.
Coach, thank you very much. We will start with our rotation of student athletes now to the podium. Coach, you can grab a seat. Bubba Bolden. Bubba, you